To make the sponge for brioche, all you have to do is take 1/3 of a cup of warm whole milk, just warmed up to about 100 degrees Fahrenheit. And we're going to put all of these ingredients into the bowl of a heavy-duty mixer, the one that you'll be using to make the brioche. You're going to add 2 1/4 teaspoons of dry active yeast. It winds up being about 1 full packet, but not exactly. So you are going to have to measure it, and every packet kind of varies. So you might even get one that comes out being just the right amount, and you might get another one that has too much in it. Like mine has too much, so I have some extra yeast. Next, you're going to take 1 large egg and crack that into the bowl. And finally, 1 cup of unbleached all-purpose flour. Mix these together with a rubber spatula, just slightly. Make sure you get the egg broken up in there. And you just want to get it all combined. We aren't doing anything too big right now, so you don't need to be using your mixer for this. In fact, it's best if you don't. Alright, so once that's combined, get it all off your spatula. Yeast makes everything quite sticky, and you'll learn that quickly with this recipe. Sprinkle 1 more cup of flour over the top of what you just mixed, just so it's covered up. And now you leave it sit for 30 to 40 minutes, and we'll come back and check on it after that. So we've let the sponge, that first mixture we made, sit for about 30 or 40 minutes. It has started to crackle as we wanted to. There are little cracks in the flour, and that means that the yeast is good and we can continue with the making of our brioche. So to continue, I'm going to add just right into this mixture exactly. Baking is very exact. We're going to add 1/3 of a cup of sugar that I've already measured. 1 teaspoon, which I just happened to dump a little bit out of kosher salt. And this is coarse kosher salt that we want for this recipe. And I actually prefer to bake with coarse kosher salt in most of my recipes. And to that, then we're going to add 4 eggs that have been lightly beaten together. So add that in there. In brioche dough, most of the liquid, well, all of the liquid except for that 1/3 cup of milk that we added in the beginning, comes from the eggs and then the butter. The butter is where all the fat comes from, but most of the liquid comes from the eggs. So you want to make sure to get it all in there. We are also going to add 1 cup of flour and hold off on 1/2 cup to add in a little bit. Put it in your mixer. So we're just going to turn it on low just for about a minute right now. You want all of your ingredients to become combined at this point, and once they are, you will add the rest of your flour, and we'll let that incorporate in there as well. So as you see, that is coming together. While it's mixing, I'm going to add in the other 1/2 cup of flour. And let that combine as well. Once it's combined, we're going to raise the speed of the mixer up to a medium speed and let it mix for about 15 minutes. Like I said, the mixing time is long. It requires a lot of time to get everything incorporated in there. So this looks pretty good. I'm just going to stop it down for a second so we can scrape the bowl, make sure everything is going to be getting an equal mix with the dough hook. And it is very, very sticky at this point. However, since it did come together, I wouldn't advise adding any more flour. If it hadn't come together like it is now, then you would probably need a little bit more. So let's turn this up to medium and be sure to lock your mixer down. Now we're going to let it go for 15 minutes. 15 minutes. And you'll notice that the mixer is going to get very hot. The motor's working very hard, so don't worry, it can do it as long as you have a heavy-duty mixer. If you aren't sure, check with the manufacturer or your booklet you have, the instructions, to see if it can handle such a long bread mixing process. Continue to mix and come together. It will fall apart, then pick up, and then drop down, and pick up and drop down. You want it to sound like it's slapping the side of the bowl, which is what we hear now. So while this is mixing, we're going to go ahead and move on to the next step, which we can get started beforehand. In fact, you need to get started beforehand. You're going to take the butter for the recipe. The recipe calls for 1.5 sticks or 6 ounces of butter. And what you're going to do, you want it to be at room temperature but not melted. You still don't want it to be oily at all. You don't want it to be shiny. You just want it to be soft enough because of what we are about to do to it. You want to take a spreader or a spatula. My spatula has some dough on it. It's not that big of a deal, but I'm going to take it off first. And what we're going to do is we want the butter to be about the same consistency as the brioche dough when we add them together. That way they'll mix better, they'll mix more evenly, there won't be any problems. So while this mix is finishing up, it has about 5 more minutes, maybe a little less. We're just going to spread this butter, basically smash it and spread it, turn it into a buttery spread. That dough looks great. I'm going to actually turn the mixer. It's moving on its own right now. And we can stop that. See how well the dough has come together here? It's in one ball. So here our butter's ready. And what we're going to do is just take it about just a few tablespoons at a time. Turn the mixer on low. And just pick up a few tablespoons and scoop them in. And keep adding about a few tablespoons at a time. I've got a decent amount of butter in there right now. I'm just going to give it a few minutes to incorporate. So this mixes. We're going to turn it up now. And let it mix for a long time like we did before. We're going to turn it up really high for about a minute. Back down. And this is going to mix for about 5 more minutes. And the dough looks pretty nice. What that slapping sound means is we're probably not going to have to mix it for the full 5 minutes. Just let it run for about 1 more minute instead. And now we're ready to stop it. And that's the end of our mixing the dough. The next stage is going to be 2 long rises. The first one is shorter than the second, so it really actually isn't that long at all. We're just going to scoop this into the bottom of the bowl. And you are going to take a buttered bowl. You want it to be quite large and very well buttered. The dough that we have here in the mixer right now is going to basically double in size as it rises this first time. And you want to make sure the bowl you're putting it into is big enough to handle that. And when you do this and it's sticking like it is now, that does not mean that it isn't ready or it needs more flour. Because as you saw was that it can all pick up together. It just needs a little work. Now you're going to cover this with some plastic wrap so that there's no air coming into it. And just let it sit out on your counter for about 45 minutes for this first rise. When that rise is done, you'll come in. It'll have come about double in size, like I said. To deflate the dough is what we're calling it. Is you're going to slip your fingers underneath the sides and just pick it up a little bit. And you'll notice immediately that the dough starts to deflate when you do this. And go all the way around the edges. And that's after the first rise. After about 45 minutes and you deflate it, cover it back up again and put it in the refrigerator for the second rise. That you want to do overnight. So here you have your finished product. And unfortunately I don't have one cooled and ready to serve, but this is what it'll look like. And don't forget the custard on the inside is sweet, and there's also sugar and quite a bit of butter in the dough, so it's going to be a very rich breakfast pastry, but always delicious. Bon appetit.